Let's think about an animal that is a prey animal. Animals likely to get preyed upon.
Yeah.
A bunny rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you think about a bunny rabbit, we're anthropomorphizing here, I guess, but a bunny rabbit unmistakably looks anxious and hypervigilant.
Yeah.
Okay. They're alert. They're on guard. They're kind of very ready to run for their lives. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're kind of pre-freaked out most of the time.
Yeah. So they're cute and fluffy, but they're twitchy. They've got like a disposition of being twitchy.
Yeah, I mean, not so much pets, but the ones in the wild, 100%. So what's going on there is they have a fear circuit that's engaged, it's locked on, and it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay, because chances are a fox or whatever's going to come and get you, and you want to be prepared for that, and you're better off fleeing even for a false alarm than being someone's dinner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is if you like, the prey circuit. Okay. And that's kind of what anxiety is really activating, all right, as opposed to more of a predator circuit. So let's think about another animal like a lion, okay? So lions, not too twitchy looking.
No.
Okay? If they're not busily kind of stalking or killing something, they're sort of loafing around.
Yes.
Okay.
Send the lionesses out.
Yeah, exactly. They're looking very, very chill.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's going on there is there's not a lot of fear circuitry being engaged in those.
No, well, they're at the top of the food chain. They don't have much to be afraid of.
Exactly. Okay. So I'm talking about lions. I'm talking about bunny rabbits. What's that got to do with humans? Well, in prehistory, or for that matter, in modernity, but certainly in prehistory, humans were at times prey for other animals, and at other times we were predators upon other animals.
Okay, so we've got both circuits.
We've got both circuits.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got both circuits. Now, some people might be more predisposed to activating one circuit than another. Okay, so there is classically anxious people don't also tend to be particularly angry people. All right.
Yeah.
You can get irritability as part of anxiety, and okay, sure, no worries.
You're going to probably see that more where there's been a trauma history, PTSD sort of presentation.
PTSD, it's interesting because you can get, I think in PTSD, there are some people that have predominant sort of anger disposition, depending on what their trauma was, or predominant fear disposition. And sometimes they can switch as well.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But typically speaking, generalized anxiety,
generally our anxiety people are kind of anxious. Okay? They're worried about all kinds of stuff. And the particular flavour of anxiety, if it's social anxiety, it's fear of humiliation. If it's generalised anxiety, it's fear of the worst thing happening. So forth and so on. Okay, but it's disproportionate to the situation. And what's happened is you've had an engagement of that fear circuit, and if you like, you're sort of fear circuit dominant. You're bunny rabbit mode dominant.
Yeah.
Okay, doesn't mean you can't activate the other circuit, and you can. Okay, the sort of lion sort of predator circuit that can be activated, but the default seems to go the other way.
Yeah. So here we're getting into the fight-flight model, whereas your flight is probably more of your bunny rabbits, your flight's more of your lions. Is that where you're kind of matching it up?
Yeah, sure. Because I guess the underlying physiology of whatever's pushing your buttons in that situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Essentially, the neurological response below the brain is quite similar. Okay, so it might be anger in your brain or fear in the brain, but basically what happens is you get activation of what's called the sympathetic nervous system. You get release of adrenaline. You get all this stuff happening, okay, in your body, which also feeds back to your brain, by the way. And so
we might say this talk on the physiology of what's actually happening during a fight or flight for our next video.
Let's do that.
Okay, so come back to your bunny rabbits and lions.
Yep.
What are we going to do about it?
What are we going to do about it? Okay, so what is the gold standard treatment for anxiety disorders?
Exposure therapy.
Exposure therapy. So what exposure therapy is, if you're unaware, essentially, let's say you're afraid of getting in the lift, okay? So what exposure therapy involves is, in a graduated way, you expose yourself to the fearful situation. So that might be something like, standing near the lift initially, and you do that a number of times until that's easy, okay? And then it's pushing the button, getting in for a second, and then getting back out.
Yeah.
And then getting in for a couple of seconds, and then getting back out, and then getting in and letting the door close, and then opening the door, and you build it up, and you build it up, and you build it up, okay, until you can take a few flights of stairs, a few flights, and away you go. Okay, so that's exposure therapy, and we know it works 100%.
Beautiful.
Okay.
It does.
The other thing that's interesting though is what seems to happen is if someone is their approach to exposure therapy, if they're very kind of bunny rabbit in their approach, like, oh, I don't want to go to the lift, oh, I'm freaking out, they don't go as well.
Yes,
okay?
I would agree.
It's I mean, it's torture for them. Okay, it's not much fun for the therapist either.
No.
Okay, and it takes a lot longer. You need a lot more exposures, and it's and whereas if you kind of help the patient understand that there are these different circuits, and we invite them to try and activate, even if it's a sort of a face it, and thank you for that, face it until
Face
you
it,
make it.
yeah. It's not fake it till you make it, it's face it until you make it.
Yeah, even if it's a face it until you make it kind of approach, we ask them to, okay, let's stump up as much courage as we can to do this exposure therapy on our front foot. So we're not kind of freaking out and
So you
going
want them
into
to
it.
channel their inner lion.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay.
exactly. We want them to attack the issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want them to engage that sort of predator circuitry.
Yeah.
Okay, when that happens, people, relatively speaking, breeze through exposure therapy.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not only do you need fewer exposures, you can have bigger jumps. So instead of, with a lift example, instead of 2 seconds in the lift, let the door close, people just graduate a lot quicker up the sort of hierarchy of difficulty.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I suppose exposure therapy, from a behavioural point of view, you're exposing yourself one way or another. But what you're actually pointing out here, the difference is the mindset. Are you going into the exposure as a bunny rabbit, or are you going into the exposure as a lion? And that is really going to dictate your success.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay.
But not only in exposure therapy, like in the therapy itself. Okay, it's helpful, I think, for people just so they might be in bed at night stewing about whatever they're anxious about the next day. Okay, well, they're probably in that kind of bunny rabbit mode. So just thinking, oh, hang on, I'm in that bunny rabbit mode.
Okay.
Okay, all right. How can I actually attack this tomorrow? What can I do rather than freaking out about the inevitable sunrise and what's going to ensue afterwards? How can I tackle this in a more proactive, more kind of predator-like way? Okay. So that's I think helpful as a day-to-day kind of strategy, as well as for the exposure therapy itself.
Okay. All right. Guys, we hope you found that helpful. Leave us a couple of comments on the YouTube channel. Otherwise, send us through some emails at oscar@oscaronline.org. Let us know if you found that helpful, and tell us, do you think you're a bunny rabbit or a lion? Thanks, guys.
Thank you.